Welcome back to dystopian realism in the place where there is no darkness. An alarming number of people don't care at all about liberal democratic norms. So said UK radio host James O'Brien, quoting from an article by Conservative peer Daniel Finkelstein. It was part of one of his long and well-meaning diatribes, and this one took place on the morning after the US presidential election. O'Brien was essentially expressing his bewilderment at why ungrateful US voters would not want to protect the status quo by voting against Donald Trump. My question to O'Brien and his ilk is, why would they? To be clear, I really don't think that voting for Trump will make life better for anybody other than possibly the top 10% of American voters by income, and in the longer term, not even for them. American voters are, well, to put it charitably, confused. For example, it's clear that some have forgotten, if ever they knew, that it was Trump's Supreme Court choices that led to the repeal of the Dobbs decision on abortion, and they actually think that it's the Donald who has, in fact, protected their reproductive rights. Many Latinas and Latinos who came to the US illegally but later became naturalized US citizens are clearly under the impression that MAGA stormtroopers will not come for them or their families. And then, of course, there's the higher Trump tariffs. These will cause all sorts of problems for the US economy and, in fact, if anything, make prices considerably higher. Of course, the reasons for Trump's victory, or more accurately, I suppose, Harris's defeat, are clearly immaterial. Biden and Harris's big enemies were always inflation, an inflation that hollowed out American standard of living. Like almost all incumbent regimes around the world that had to deal with COVID and its immediate aftermath, the Biden-Harris administration crumbled due to a cost of living crisis and an economy that was only really working long-term for the rich. You might ask, shouldn't voters be more aware of the Trump threat to democracy that would reduce their chances of voting him out when his own economic policies ultimately fail? And shouldn't they have swallowed their economic misgivings in order to safeguard their democratic liberty? But what's the state of that democratic liberty right now? Well, from an economic point of view at least, it's been a very grim ride. Living standards have been flatlining since the 70s, despite rising productivity from workers and a stock market that was clearly on steroids. But even if we discount the economic failings of liberal democracies, in pure political terms, liberal democracy looks like a contradiction in terms and a sham. No wonder that for all voters, both Democrat and Republicans, the state of democracy itself has been the number 2 cause of concern, according to polls, after the economy. Noam Chomsky maintained that there's only one party in the US, the business party, and the Republicans and Democrats have done very little to discredit this analysis. Issues such as universal health care, which enjoyed wide support in both parties, seem to be excluded from any serious discussion or contestation. Meanwhile, nearly all foreign policy is consistent between both factions of the Republican-Democrat uniparty. Constant gaslighting is the norm. For years, Democratic Party technocrats and their cheerleaders insisted that sleepy Joe Biden was 100% compos mentis, despite obvious evidence of his pitiable decline. America looked on, horrified, as the man with the nuclear codes fell over, saw ghosts in the room, and even soiled himself live on national television. Don't worry, they told us. The stewardship of the Western world is safe in his trembling hands. Then suddenly the electorate were told that Uncle Joe Brandon wasn't running for a second term after all, and they should dutifully swing behind Kamala Harris, a mediocre, unpopular politician with only moderate charisma, which the party machine had kept sidelined for nearly all of the Biden presidency. Not only were the party faithful to embrace Harris, there would be no primary vote, simply a coronation. This was a new reality, and you just had to adjust to it. Since his rise to prominence, the Democratic Party had warned Americans that Trump is a threat to democracy and the Constitution. Observant voters might well have asked, why do Democrats cozy up to him at cross-party social events and talk about reaching across the aisle? If they really thought Trump would end democracy, why would they hand over the keys of the Oval Office quite so willingly? Why wouldn't they, to quote Trump himself, fight like hell? Either the Democrats were lying about Trump's fascism, or they really didn't care too much about its ascendancy. Either way, the political class are at least as evil in the eyes of the electorate as Trump paints them. And Trump's genius, of course, is to present himself as outside the system of power and privilege into which he himself was born. And I think the thing which most highlights the disconnect between what politicians and the political class say and the reality of people's lives is the incontrovertible horror of the ethnic cleansing at best and genocide at worst in occupied Palestine and Lebanon. The gaslighting reaches incredible heights, with slick-speaking spokespeople for the Democratic Party and the Biden administration explaining why Israel has a right to defend itself against pregnant mothers and babies. Voters must have realised a long time ago that the whole thing is rigged, that it's just a game for most of the participants. If you want to know why those electors can vote for an adjudicated rapist like Trump, my reply to you would be well, his opponent is clearly a supporter of mass slaughter and genocide. It's not much of a choice, is it? So why not give the dice another roll in favour of Trump, even if last time things didn't work out so well? Because Trump, despite his riches and connections, can simulate outsider status by miming fellatio with his microphone, eulogising Arnold Palmer's genitalia, and generally saying the unsayable, dancing the undanceable, and thinking the unthinkable. He's taken the polite out of politics and the toothpaste out of the tube. He basks in the evil of empire instead of masking it. Why not let this iconoclast shake it all up in Washington again? Surely change, radical change, even a change for the worse, is better than the day in, day out decline of the American dream. The whole situation reminds me very much of Brexit in the UK. When confronted by the question, won't your vote wreck the economy? An anonymous Brexit voter spat back, it's not my economy. Because the fact that the Biden economy is the best in years doesn't seem to have made any difference. In fact, a recent poll showed that almost 60% of Americans erroneously believe that the American economy is shrinking rather than growing. But it's not just the economy that's not mine or yours. It's the whole democratic system. Endless wars, mutating forms of repression for minorities and women, the global neocolonialism. Because of these things, liberal democracy has been a mirage for everybody who isn't comfortable, cis, heterosexual, white or male. When he asked what he thought of Western democracy, Gandhi famously replied, "It would be a good idea." From today's perspective, Western civilization and a true liberal democracy for all would at least be a good start. Thanks very much for listening. Please like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe, and we shall meet again in the place where there is no darkness.